Mimi Nicklin is an internationally best-selling author and the founder of Empathy Everywhere, the world's widest-reaching empathy training platform. She has trained over 20,000 professionals across Fortune 500 companies and recently appeared live on BBC to 85 million viewers. Recognized as Malaysia's #1 workplace well-being voice and the #12 female influencer on LinkedIn nationwide, Mimi is on a bold mission to reconnect 1 million people by 2028 to a world facing an empathy deficit. Her brand new second book, Empathy at Work, recently released globally, and she will be signing copies exclusively here after her session. In her keynote today, she will share the secrets behind building engagement, empowerment, and performance for both a thriving workplace and a nation. So with this introduction, ladies and gentlemen, please join me now in welcoming Mimi Nicklin.
Good morning. Suvadesanak. Nage nama Mimi. Imama adare lankawata. How did I do? Amazing. It is because of that I couldn't be more honored to be in a room in Colombo with so many of you. I have spent the last half a decade living and working here, and many people abroad here too, they call me the cheerleader for Sri Lanka because I travel the world talking about you guys everywhere. And you know what? I think you deserve cheering. Because in all of those years that I've been here, the one thing that never stops is my optimism for this island and for all of you. And you know, Sri Lankans are amazing people. I lived here with you all 2021, 2022. Not our easiest years, right? But whatever life throws at you, you guys just pivot and carry on. Somebody will come and say, "Te onada." Oh, and we carry on. Have a cup of tea and everything's okay. So it gives me great pleasure to be able to be talking about how we thrive in a city that helps me thrive. I spend my life on a plane, and every time that I land here, I feel like I've come back home. So thank you for having me, and thank you for listening. Today, I'm going to look at what thriving really means. When I looked into the data for today, and I'm going to show it to you, it's a little bit hard to watch, I have to be honest. We have some gaps to fill, and I want to look at what that means. But I'm going to start by looking at the world at large, not just here, because we have a really big problem. And that problem, the clicker's not working, guys, that problem is worth $8.8 trillion. It's a really big number. Can someone fix this? I'm going to carry on without it for now. Do you know, last week, there it is, let's see. Last week I went to Mumbai to their national HR conference, and the slides died, and I did the whole thing without it. No, it's not working. Someone can fix. I'm just going to talk from the soul. $8.8 trillion. That is the estimated loss in productivity due to 3 key things that are on the screen right here. Disengagement, presenteeism, and disconnection. What that means is that people are coming to work, but they're not engaging with their work. They're turning up at 9, they're going home at 5, but that's all they're doing. They're not going above and beyond, they're not innovating, they're not creating, they're present, presenteeism. You can't fire them. They are delivering on their job description, but that's about it. And then disconnection. Disconnection is the feeling when you go into a room and you feel like you don't belong, that the people there don't understand you, and it is fragmenting our world. In fact, it's disintegrating all of our business success. Such a nightmare. It still doesn't work, guys. Okay, here's the thing. I can't do half tech, so let's turn the tech off, because otherwise it's going to distract, and I'll just talk. So I told you that I looked at the data for what that really means here in Sri Lanka. There's brand new data from Gallup. Gallup studies people all around the world, and it came out about a month ago. And what it shows us in that data is that only 10% of Sri Lankans consider themselves to be thriving. That means that 90% of our nation is not there yet. When we look at the data further, 45% of Sri Lankans are considering resigning right now. 23% of Sri Lankans consider themselves engaged. What that means is that over 75% of our workforces are not engaged. Imagine for a minute 75% of this room turning up, doing their job, going home. Imagine the cost of that. Imagine the resources to replace them. 75% of us not engaged in our workplace. But here's the thing. When you add that up and realize the impact, there can be a feeling that you're disempowered to solve that. But so much of reconnecting our workforce starts with you. It starts with the people in this room, because we are at work for 92,000 hours of our lives. 5/7 of most weeks you're at work. That means if we're going to solve this, if we're going to solve for Lanka, you guys are going to do it. Let me tell you a little bit more about the data. There's one main reason that I get up every day, that I travel to another country, that I leave my little girl and get on another plane and do this work. And it comes down to one key data set, and it's this. It's that 52% of us, statistically, are lonely. Now, loneliness, it's not the absence of people. We are always surrounded by people, right? In a tuk, in the bus, wherever you are, at the cricket club, right? People everywhere. Loneliness is the absence of connection. You can be lonely, but not alone. Half of us are lonely. The Surgeon General of the USA has stated that loneliness is as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. If you are lonely chronically all the time, you are statistically likely to die 8 years younger. Our loneliness is killing us. So why? Why are we so lonely? Do you know that 336 million people don't have a single friend? We are living through something called an empathy deficit. The empathy deficit was coined by Barack Obama in 2006. He stood up and he addressed his audience and he said, "Today I should talk about my federal deficit, but I think we should be talking about our empathy deficit." 20 years went by. We've done very little to turn that around. I would argue he wasn't wrong. When empathy goes down, the isms, racism, ageism, sexism, nationalism, any ism, go up. Because when we don't understand each other, segregation, isolation, disengagement follows. And that is natural. Because as human beings, we don't like change. Our brains cannot decipher between different types of risk. So our brains are these amazing things, and of course we've evolved brilliantly over a few 100,000 years. But the one thing the brain cannot do, still today, is tell the difference between fear from, say, a toxic leader or a difficult situation, and fear from the fear of death or falling off a cliff. The brain doesn't know. So when we disconnect from people, the brain quite literally stops us building relationships. This empathy deficit has been growing for over 30 years. We have lost 48% of it. Now, when I explain that empathy is a pro-social skill set, this is not just about thriving at work. You will thrive at work, right? If there's more understanding in the workplace, you will thrive. But this is about more than that. This is about the survival of the human race. We cannot do this alone. We are a pro-social species. We need to be together. And if we're going to build a thriving nation, we need to do that together too. So what is it? What is empathy? Empathy is fundamentally perspective taking. The ability to understand the person next to you at your table, to step into their world. There is nothing soft about this skill set. It's really important to me, anytime I get the chance to speak to HR leaders or leaders in general, that I ask them a favor. And this is that favor. In the world today, we still hear people calling communication skills, emotional intelligence skills, empathy skills, soft skills. Ladies and gentlemen, please, please, may this be the last day you ever say it. These skills help us survive, they connect our businesses, and they will lead you to 23% higher profits. These are hugely powerful skills. They're hard to find, they're hard to master, they're very hard to sustain. They are scientific, not soft. So please stop using the word soft skills in your training, in your systems, in your investments. Because for as long as we call them soft, the investment won't come. And the future of our workplaces, you saw some of it yesterday, the future of our workplaces needs us to use them. I am a great believer in AI. I think that the solution for all HR sits in one equation. AI plus HI, human intelligence, equals ROI, return on investment. But to do that, we have to be able to connect with each other. So organizational empathy is fundamentally the ability for you all to listen better in the workplace, for you to understand each other. When people feel that they belong, they rise. They reach their potential. And again, that goes back to neuroscience. There is part of our brain that responds with something called the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response was an evolutionary ability for our brains to protect us from danger. So when something difficult happens or you face trouble, your brain changes the way that your body works. So imagine for a moment that we are all cavemen and women living in the jungles of Sri Lanka hundreds of thousands of years ago. And you are gathering your food for the day. And out of the jungle comes a leopard, and he looks hungry. You have only two choices as a human. You can either fight the leopard, or you can flight, run away from the leopard. Because of that, the brain evolved to shift the chemicals in your brain to allow you to do that. So when you see danger, your brain shifts, it moves the blood and the energy away from the prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain, the part of your brain where empathy sits. It does that so that you can push all of that energy, adrenaline, to your legs, to your arms, to your lungs to run away. But of course, once it's done that, you can no longer think strategically. You don't need to think strategically. You need to escape the leopard, right? The reason I'm telling you that is that as human beings, if we are in a workplace where we feel anxious, where we don't feel understood, where I don't think you're listening to me, our brains will respond the same way. You cannot then expect them to reach their potential because the part of the brain that you need them to use is no longer active. They can't be the most strategic, creative, productive versions of themselves. When we reconnect our workplaces with empathy, with understanding, we can drive performance. We see 36% higher levels of output, 68% higher levels of engagement, 48% higher levels of innovation. I will give you all of this data. It's on my slides, so anyone that wants it, just message me after this, and I can provide you with the business case. The point is, when we are able to engage and connect, we are able to thrive. Higher levels of empathy are about the science of humanity. This is about reconnecting your businesses and, yes, driving the nation together. Today, we work in very multi-generational teams, especially here in Sri Lanka, right? You might have the chairman at the very top, perhaps in his 70s, 80s, maybe in some industries, even into his 90s. At the very bottom, we have young people coming in at 17 or 18 years old. They don't know how to speak the same language, let alone tweet the same language, right? They don't know how to communicate. The future of our productivity, our ability to drive GDP, demands of us to find ways to drive that communication, to enable us to understand that empathy is not about agreement. It's not about liking. It's not about judgment. It's just the skill of understanding. You will often find empathy mentioned in organizations like the FBI, right? The Federal Bureau of Intelligence in the USA. The FBI has a model called the Behavioral Change Stairway. The Behavioral Change Stairway model framework was created for hostage situations, really tough situations, where there is a person in the bank with a gun and a whole lot of hostages locked inside. What the FBI learned was that if you want to create any level of behavioral change, whether it's as a nation, as a business, or when managing hostages, you need to first understand. So what the model shows us is that there are steps to creating change. And the first is to listen. How often are you listening to the people around you? How often are you listening to reply versus listening to understand? To listen effectively is to decode, to understand another. And what the FBI model does is say that the first step to any level of change has to start with listening. Are you being listened to? Are you listening to others? Once you have that listening, you can build rapport, trust. Only then can you begin to have understanding, empathy. And once that's in place, you can start to shift behavior. Whether that is performance at work or enabling someone with hostages in a bank. Everybody wants to be heard. We're born that way. In fact, babies that are born equally sick, the one that gets more empathy outlives the other. I have a video in my presentation of my little girl. Her name is Umi. She's 7 years old. And in the video, you're going to have to imagine it to catch up with the tech. In the video, I'm sitting in a video shoot. I'm in my house. And she comes in. And like all 7-year-olds, she says, "Mummy, why can't I be in the video? Why do you always get to make these videos?" So I said, "Okay, come. Enda, come." Right? She sits with me. I say, "Okay, what do you want to talk about?" She says, "Empathy." She knows what I do. So I said to her, "Okay, Umi, tell me, what is listening?" She says, "Well, listening is to pay attention to people, to listen to what they want to say." And I said, "Yes. And when we don't listen, how do we feel?" She says, "Mummy, when you don't listen, I think you don't care and you don't want to be my friend." Our children know this, guys. Ask your children, they know. They know that when you don't listen to them, they think you don't care. You don't want to be my friend. Now, perhaps we're not trying to make friends at work, but the principle aligns. If you don't listen to your teams and your teammates, they think you're not interested. They don't think they have value, that you don't care about their role. Ask yourself this. For any of you who are parents in the audience or who have children in your lives, how often you are really listening to understand. My little girl, when she comes home from work, she's not at work, she's at school. If she was at work, we'd be in trouble. When she comes home from school, she'll sit in the back of the car and she'll tell me about all the things that happened in the day, right? And "Mummy, I was in the playground and then there was a biscuit and I dropped the biscuit and then my friend picked up the biscuit and I," right, 7-year-old stories. How often, when that happens, are you actually listening to their story? Or, in your mind, are you going through all the other 100 things you're supposed to be doing? Will there be traffic on the road? Did I tell my boss I'm going to be late tomorrow? Have I finished that PowerPoint deck? Is that call on Zoom or Teams? You're not really listening. You can hear her, but you're not listening to her. People ask me all the time why teenagers don't listen, right? My daughter became 13 years old and she just won't listen anymore. And I always say to them, did you listen to her for the first 12 years of her life? Who did she learn not to listen from? To listen is our ability to connect. It is a superpower. If you don't listen to your people, if you don't understand them, how are you ever going to drive performance? How are you going to know what incentives work? Recently, I had a call from a CEO of a Japanese company in Belgium. And the head of HR called me and said, "Mimi, we've got a problem." So I said, "Okay, tell me what the problem is." This company's 100 years old. And for 100 years, when the managers became senior managers, they gave them a car that had been in place for decades. Except last year, when that round of senior managers got promoted and they gave them the car, the manager said, "We don't want a car." HR was like, what do you mean you don't want a car? They were like, "Have you seen the state of the planet? We don't want to put any more fuel into this system. We are sustainable citizens, right? We want to protect our world." So HR left and called me. I said, "Well, what do we do?" I said, "Well, have you asked them what they do want?" They said, "No." I said, "Well, let's start there." In the meantime, HR had a meeting on their own without the managers. And they had what they thought was a brilliant idea. They went back to the managers and they said, "Don't worry, we've cracked it. We're going to give you all bikes." And these managers were like, No. A car is worth like $30,000. The bike is worth $2,000. This is not going to work, right? You cannot drive performance. You cannot work out your benefit strategy if you don't talk to your people. What they want may not be what you wanted. And you know what? You may never understand why. And that's fine. We don't need to judge what they want. We just need to understand it so that we can serve them. We talk a lot about inclusion. The question goes again, how can you ever include someone if you don't understand them? As women, for all the women in the room, we are constantly told that we should want a seat at the table. Firstly, does anyone know where the table is? What table? We've been told for decades upon decades that that is what we should want. But I can tell you, because I work with female leaders all over the world, most of us don't. She might want to be vice president and high earning and full of power and changing the world. But when the end of the day comes, she might want to just go home to her kids or go for a run or join her friends. She may not then want to sit at a table and plan next year's double-digit growth plan. Women will rise, but you need to understand them if we're going to do it together. We cannot solve 100% of the world's problems with only 50% of us. Understanding unlocks progress. Motivation is fundamentally